Hi, shalom friends. Do you know anyone who's not interested in being successful? I have not met such a person. I wonder if you have. And as a matter of fact, success seems to be like one of the highest levels of compliment. He's like, he's a successful lawyer, successful marriage, successful business. In fact, one of the things we like to say is he's a success story. But we often also are somewhat mystified, where the person who seems to be so successful in what he's doing, suddenly that beautiful marriage seems to disappear. The lawyer gets involved in something shady. The successful businessman goes out of business or changes his business. And we say, why would he do that? Well, it's a complex issue why people change and feel unsuccessful in what they're doing. So I think we have to go back and perhaps evaluate what is the translation or what makes a person successful. Now, there are, I'm sure, many, many different ways to interpret it. I'll give you one interpretation, one definition, and that is success is a person who meets his goals. So if you have a goal, you have a mission, you have a direction, and you actually meet it, you actually fulfill it, you're successful. But if your goal has not been met, even though you seem to be quite productive in many other fields, because your primary goal, which you have patterned your life to meet, and you haven't been there or you haven't reached there, then you would consider yourself unsuccessful. And that's really a bit of the discord. We look at people and we judge them on our standards. So if, for example, a business that's flourishing in my eyes is success, I'll say he's a very successful businessman. But if that person defines success, he has a different goal for his business. Maybe he wants to become a brand name. No matter how much money he's making, he might feel himself unsuccessful because he's never reached that particular goal. So part of the issue of being successful is, how do you know when you are successful? They say about a very, very famous archer who was reputed to hit the bullseye 97% of the time. And he was a master. And one day he overheard that there's someone in a different town that hits the bullseye 100% of the time. And he was amazed because he knows that was close to impossible. He knew how many hundreds of hours he put into perfecting his own skill. So he decides to run to the next town to meet the master. And he asked to see some of the results. And sure enough, there were trees that were marked with bullseyes, and the arrow was in the middle of the bullseye, and so on. So he asked the archer, how do you do it? What's your secret? And he said, it's really very simple. I arch the bow, the arrow flies, reaches the tree, and then wherever the arrow is stuck, that becomes the bullseye. And I just simply make circles around it. Obviously, that's not much of a master, but I was thinking to myself, that's really describes much of what we do. If you ask yourself, would you like to be a success? Yes. And you say, well, how do you define success? And many of us have this lackadaisical approach, like wherever we will be, we will build a world around it. This is a rather silly example, but what happens, for example, you one time wanted to be a biologist working in a laboratory. So you're struggling through college, you have to make it, you start working for Uber. And 1 year passes and the second year passes, you're getting a lot of likes, a lot of tips, and Uber loves you, and you're making enough money to have your own studio or apartment. And essentially, 2 years into the Uber job, the hope, the goal, and the dream of being a biologist is somehow regulated to the back. Now the question is, are you a successful person? Someone might say, sure, look, he has his own apartment, he has a steady income, he has plenty of time, he works on his own time, he has a friend, and so on. But this person, after a couple of years, will certainly question himself, is he successful? That's not what he wanted to start it off being. Instead, wherever the arrow landed, then he created a world around the Uber, when the reality was the bullseye was the biologist. I'll tell you something interesting. I had a discussion last week with a person, very smart, very motivated, and I asked him, where would he like to be? How does he see himself in a couple of years from now? And he had no hesitation. He said, I want to be the head of a company, and I want to be a very wealthy person. And I'm quite sure that with God's help he will, because he's really, really driven. I said, is there anything else? He said, yeah. I said, what? And he was fumbling. So I said, would you like to be married? So, oh yeah, I want to be married. I said, would you like to be a fully functioning member of the Jewish community? Oh yeah. So I want to ask you a question. Do you see this as exclusive of one another or complementary to one another? If you're focused, if your goal is to be a very successful businessman, where does marriage fit in? Or how does marriage fit in? Is your wife going to share that vision with you? Do you feel that you should give all you got to your spouse and what remains to the business? Or is it the other way around? Everything you got, all of your time, your effort, your passion is towards business, but it would be nice to have a female companion with me. And it's not impossible for that to happen, but you certainly have to define your goal. What exactly do you want? Now, can you be successful and have a good marriage and be fully functional in the Jewish community? 100%. But you're not going to find it easy. They don't always intersect at all. So I want to share with you a very simple idea, and that is, it is worthwhile for every person to spend maybe some time, whether it be once a year, once in 6 months, or once in 2 years, not to think about where they are, but to simply ask themselves the question, where do I want to be in 5 years from now? Write down on a piece of paper what you think you want to be, or what you would truly want to see yourself be in 5 years from now. If you could define that, I want this and that. For example, I want to be the head of a company, then you will be able to measure your success by seeing the steps that it takes. How are you getting there to run the company? So if you're touring Europe or you're taking hobbies, that might or might not lead you to the goal of being the head of the company. Even though temporarily, it seems to be quite fulfilling. If you want to be happily married in 5 years from now, that's how you see yourself, happily married. So then, if that is your clearly defined goal, what are you doing? What steps are you taking to get there? Who are you dating? What do you offer? How do you define happiness? Sometimes in the midst of a mission, we just can't find ourselves. Occasionally, it's worthwhile to see yourself not the way you are now, because where you are now, you've already created circles. You imagine yourself to be the bullseye and everything else is around you. Rather, picture a bullseye. Where do you want to go? Where does that arrow want to land? And then you will create the circles around it. To a certain extent, I believe that God gave us the Jewish holidays partially for this reason, because every time it comes a holiday, we have an opportunity to think, am I free? Am I truly free? How do I define freedom? And last year's goal of being free doesn't necessarily translate to this year. I have Passover all over again. I would like to be a scholar of Torah. I'd like to be involved in the study of Torah. How do I know I'm getting there? Comes Shavuot, I have a festival of the giving of the Torah. Well, we're now the upcoming holiday of Hanukkah. How dedicated am I to my religion? How sincere am I? How affected am I by the Torah? Comes Hanukkah, an entire week, 8 nights, to light the candles and to do some introspection as well as celebration. So friends, we are successful, we can be successful, we will be successful. All we have to do is remind ourselves of the goal. Shalom.